Okay, here's where we are. I've got this loomed up. There's like two connections. I haven't waited on some wire, knock sensing wire and whatnot. These are my 280 or 300 ZX plugs. So you unplug one of these two and plug it into the harness to choose what computer you want to run. I've got the under dash connection. That's where you plug in to get the B plus always on, the ignition switched on, and the pump out, and the start signal. Here's your two relays, your fuel pump and your EFI relay. They'll go underneath the dash in the stock location. Here's the firewall plug. I got that from, I think it's called Banzai Auto Works. I think I mentioned them in the last video. Here's the shorting plug. So if you want to run resistors, you undo these shorting plugs and you plug in the resistor pack. Right now I've got it shorting plugs in. So this is designed to, to match the computer to the type of fuel injectors you have. And it's an impedance mismatch is what you worry about. And a resistor dropping pack takes that into account. These are your two fuse link B plus connections. One is for the EFI relay, and one is for the pluses to all the. I'm sorry, is that right? One's to the. Let me think of this. One's hot goes to the resistor pack, and then to the injector. Yeah, and the other one goes to the EFI relay to supply juice to the relay. I'm not using the ignition on power supply. That's what comes out of right here is the green and white wire. To do anything but turn on the relay, the EFI relay in the 280 mode, not the 300 mode, because it's not really. I based on how the 280Z is set up, I didn't see that line carrying any substantial amounts of current, so I didn't want to pull excess current through the ignition switch. So that's not going to be used for that, for anything but just turning on the EFI and supplying it where it's supposed to be. Down here you've got your cylinder head temperature switch. I haven't got the knock sensor wire in yet. We've got a couple grounds here. I think that's an O2 ground and a MAP ground. Here's the rest of the MAP or AFM connection. That's also going to get a 6-pin connector, so you can swap between an airflow meter and a mass airflow. It's a different setup, different configuration. Then you have your various sensors, O2 and AGC and AGC. I'm thinking of TVs. O2, AAC, EGR, fuel temperature, air regulator. I can't remember all of them. The one I'm going to add that's not on here yet is there was actually a lead called fuel pressure. I think it's a single wire, goes all the way back to the computer. I just won't plug in it if I don't need it, but if I can ever figure out how to make that work, it'll be there. There's one other one's a speed sensor, and that has something to do with cycling the self-clean mode of the airflow meter, or the mass airflow meter, MAP. I haven't figured out how to work that out yet, but I'm going to go ahead and run the wires and put them in a harness. But like I said, the only thing I'm really waiting for now is I got some 2-conductor shielded knock sensor wire on the way. I thought one conductor was the right stuff, so I actually got the wrong wire, but it takes a 2-conductor and it's shielded, so that's coming in. But it's coming right along. Here's the, like I said, if you want to switch, you just unplug this and you plug this one in its place. Here's a couple wires I have left to connect up. I'm using this poly loom stuff, that's split loom, and I'm going to do an extensive test once I get it all hooked up. The first test will be just basically wire tracing, from what pin goes to where. So I'll just use a tone, continuity signal to check to make sure I haven't made anything stupid. I've been pretty careful, though. I doubt that happened. The next test will be a computer not plugged in, power up, 280 plug in, although I don't think it matters. And I want to confirm that the EFI relay comes on with the signal turned to on. Remember, the 280 EFI relay is controlled by the ignition switch. The 300 EFI relay is controlled by smart technology. There's an always on um, positive to the EFI and a computer controlled ground to the EFI. So it actually uses the ECU to turn the EFI relay on as opposed to just the ignition switch to turn it on. That's a big difference. And I think you could probably not use that if you didn't want to. In other words, the EFI relay on should not be a big deal. I mean, it's just a relay, and you turn it on when the ignition switch is on, which is the way the 280ZX is set up. The only thing I can think, and I don't know this for a fact, is the fact that the fact that there's always power applied, this constant B plus to the EFI relay. That means it goes through the relay coil and goes back to, I think it's pin 6 on the computer. Well, if that's the case, that means pin 6 in the computer always has power on all the time. So I'm wondering, I wonder if that computer likes having power on for some kind of a memory thing, or it's trying to store some learned memory. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know how that works, but I figured why try to outthink the engineer. So if they want the computer to turn the EFI switch on, we'll do that. It made those things a little more complicated. I actually have 6 connectors on each one of those. There's 2 that control the fuel pump relay. There's 2 that control the EFI relay, because again, they're switched differently. Both cases, the fuel pump is switched differently and the EFI relay is switched differently. The remaining 2, remember 6 pins, the remaining 2 is for the air regulator. The air regulator is turned on differently, so I had to have a separate pin for the air regulator. And lastly, the last pin I used on this, and I don't even know if I need to do this or not, it was vague. There's a pin 3, I believe it is, that's on the 300 computer that goes back to the low side of the ignition coil. The 280ZX does not have that. I don't know what this computer does with that signal from the low side of the ignition coil, but I figured, well, they were asking for it. And all the online stuff I said didn't say anything about making that happen. I think some people said it doesn't matter. Because a lot of people take a 280ZX wire harness and modify it. Well, they don't add a pin 3 all the way back here, okay? So I don't, but I went ahead and put a pin 3, so the pin 6 slot in the 300 connector is populated, whereas the 280ZX connector does not have it. So obviously nothing's going back to the pin 3 on a 280Z computer. I'm not going to give the 280Z computer a signal it doesn't want, in other words. The other things like the pressure switch and the temperature, well, all you do there is you just don't plug it in. So if you run a 280ZX computer, you don't put in the fuel temperature sensor. You don't put in something called the pressure switch. Just don't plug them in. That way, again, you're not sending a signal to something that's there. It may be plugged into the computer here by the wire harness, because I'm not dealing with these. I'm not dealing with those things in these. I don't just have enough pins to do all that. So the assumption is you unplug the sensors that are not used when you're doing the 280Z. So there'll be a little bit of a manual on how you make the swap. The swap will start off by switching those plugs, switching the MAC or AFM plug, and unplugging the temperature sensor. That's that yellow one of the fuel that actually senses the fuel temperature, and the not yet installed but to be installed the something called the pressure switch. And I don't know what I'm going to do about the speed switch. I don't know if that's going to be a problem for me or not. That might be something, again, you have to unplug, because I simply ran out of terminals. I only had 6. I didn't want to commit to a 9-pin terminal to make all that happen. I guess I could have used a 9-pinner and made it that much more foolproof. But this is sort of a work in process. So if this works at all, this whole thing doesn't turn to a big mess, I'll probably end up building another one, and I'll just try to enhance it with different whatever I learned from this one. So that's where we are right now. Like I said, there's quite a bit of extensive testing to do, continuity. Oh, and the last thing, I don't know if I said this or not. Before any power gets applied, all those other checks get done. Before any power gets applied, I will also run a test light, a low amperage test light, maybe 100 milliamp test light, on the negative connection to the battery. So put it in series with the battery. The first time I hook all this up, that is. So computer gets hooked up, all the sensors are plugged in, everything's turned on. Um, I'll probably not. I'll probably just not plug in the actual fuel pump. I'll just listen for the relay to click, turn it on, and watch the test light. The test light should illuminate for 5 seconds while the fuel pump relay is energized. It'll probably also be slightly because the EFI will be on. It'll probably illuminate because of that. But my point is, with nothing going on, I'm expecting a minimal amount of current drop. In fact, when the ignition switch is in the off position, we'll see what it does. That'll be interesting because again, I said that pin 6 is always connected through the EFI relay. So I expect some minimal amperage, milliamps maybe, the computer to draw even when the ignition's off. You turn the ignition on, you should get a bigger draw because the EFI coil turns on. And then it should, 5 seconds in, it should settle back down to a very low current. And I just want to do that to make sure there's no major malfunctions anywhere that could possibly hurt the computer. This is the same thing I did when I did the test the first time when I used a stock 280ZX harness and adapted it to the test stand. There were still a lot of things I had to do to make that work. I was missing relays and such. So I'll do the same test procedure on this one. But that's the status of it. That's where we are. I'll give you a big wide angle shot of it here. So next step will be, like I said, finish up a couple wires in here. Then I'll mount it to the test stand, and that'll let me determine the lengths of all these terminations for sensors. Right now I left them extra long. I'm going to actually install them on the motor, take what wire I need, get the right terminal connector on it, and then make sure that that all fits. So that's where we are. Thanks for watching.